What inspires you? What makes you want to create? What drives you to put the pencil to the paper? In this video, I'm taking you along on the journey to see how I take inspiration and turn it into something epic. What's my starting point? What is my inspiration? For this particular illustration, my inspiration was a storm. I was outside and the wind was blowing, a storm was coming in, and it was beautiful. It instantly made me have an image in my head that I knew I had to put down. So what are the steps that I take to take what I see in my mind and put it on the page? The first step I take is to find references, whether that's through Pinterest or Google, taking my own photos. I find them for whatever it is I need and use those to help feed my inspiration. I have the beginning of an idea. Now I have to put it down, which is sometimes the scariest step. How can I take something that I saw in my head, in my mind, and get it down on paper? Well, the only way to do is to start. So that's what I did. The next step is preparation. What supplies do I want to use? What colors do I want to use? What do I want this picture to convey? For this particular piece, I already knew the color scheme I had in my head, and I knew I wanted to use watercolor. So first comes the quick, rough sketch of my idea. This doesn't ever have to be perfect. It's just your guidelines for where you want to paint. I knew I'd want blues and purples for this storm. I wanted it to feel like it was raging. I put my washi tape down. I put the first paint layer down so no white shows through, and I was ready to go. Colors can say a lot about your piece. Sometimes the color changes the entire mood of a piece. So what mood am I going for? I had to ask myself this question. The hardest part is getting that first stroke down. It's not permanent, but it feels scary. What if I don't like this? Will I have to start over? I've already spent so much time on it. Sometimes the first step is the hardest, but it's always necessary. So as you'll see in the video, I have my paint layer down. I got the first layer of clouds in. I was really happy with it as a base, and I didn't know where it would go from here. I was starting to feel like I had taken on a task that I couldn't do. I've never painted something like this, so why do I think I can do it now? I don't know what I'm doing, or at least that's what I was telling myself. Part of the art journey of each painting, each piece, each sketch is surrendering yourself to the process of creativity. You can plan, but sometimes you just know, you have a feeling that you need to put something down that you did not plan for. I had that many times throughout this piece, and I'm glad I listened to that feeling, that instinct. Something was necessary, even if I didn't know what. I was scared to paint the horse. The clouds were going well, but I didn't know how this style would work. I put in some light details and muscle details to give myself an outline, since the drawing was already covered up. So I added in my darkest layer first. I wanted this horse to look wild and raging. I was losing the horse in the painting. I was losing my saturation. The colors were all bleeding into each other. You can't see what's happening anymore. But again, I have to trust the process. In time, this might end up looking like what I have in my head. But for now, just paint. Be brave. Take that step. I found reference photos similar to the horse pose I had drawn. But it was hard to figure out, how do I make this creature look muscular but fit in with the storm? How do I make it look like it belongs in the clouds? After I added the highlight on the horse's back, I added in a shadow and a base layer of where the mane would go. I was too scared to do it at the moment, so I decided to come back to it. I didn't know what colors to use. At this point, I knew that I had lost some of my saturation. My contrast was gone. Everything was starting to look like the same tone. So I knew I had to darken something. And the first thing that I felt comfortable with, that I was for sure on, was the background. The sky needed to be dark. It needed to feel dangerous. But I decided to add that tiny bit of red to my purple paint to make sure it stood out, to help the rest of the piece come together. I think it accomplished that, but we still have a long way to go. The clouds needed more movement, they needed more detail, so I added in what I felt like needed done. I used some dry brush technique as well as some wet. I had to work quickly so my paint layer wouldn't pick up the previous one. I am using watercolor after all. After really liking where the clouds were going, they felt like a storm. They felt full of movement and thought. That's what I was going for. I felt brave enough to attempt this horse mane and tail. I knew what colors I needed now. I wanted the eye to make a statement on this horse. It's the only white point in this entire piece. I needed it to stand out, to draw the viewer to itself. I signed my name. I finished it. I did it. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. If you keep working on it, you'll overwork it. Just leave it where it is. My day was finished, and it was time to move on to something new. Or so I thought. The next day, I came back and I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what was missing. I just felt it. I knew something wasn't done. So I sat down and mixed a color. I didn't know what color I was even going to mix. But when I saw it, I knew exactly what this piece needed. So I went back in and repainted, and it made all the difference. I added in those green streaks in the clouds and in the sky and in the mane itself. I did it. I accomplished what I set out to do. As I added in those final details, I knew it was done. The story I wanted to convey has now been told. So my question to you is, what inspires you? Will you take action on that inspiration? Will you be brave and come up with something that only you can create? Thank you for joining me on this journey of struggle and success. It didn't come as easy as I'd hoped, but I did it. You can do it too. Take what inspires you and be brave.